In Paraguay, healthcare workers and opposition legislators denounced that the government of Santiago Peña and the conservative Colorado Party are privatizing public health services. Let's see more in the following report from our colleague Osvaldo Sayas.
Legislators and workers' organizations have been denouncing a silent privatization of the public health system. For example, the Ministry of Health has awarded services worth $28 million to a private consortium called Canofta.
President Santiago Peña, even during his campaign, said that Paraguay's health system should turn the Ministry of Health into a kind of central bank that manages funds and that all services should be privatized. In some way, he is now fulfilling what he said, but since there is public rejection of the privatization of the health system, he is doing it gradually. What he does is take certain services, certain areas of healthcare, and begins to outsource them.
The National Doctors Union claims that the privatization being carried out by the Colorado Party multiplies service costs fivefold. In 2025, the Diagnostic and Imaging Center outsourced services to the private company Metrotech for a value of $45 million.
The little that is allocated to health is given to outsourcing and privatization, which ends up multiplying expenses fivefold. Instead of paying, for example, 600,000 guaranis for a medical study within a public institution, the cost is being doubled, tripled, or even quintupled when paying a private company.
The Paraguayan Medical Circle also denounced that the privatization of services not only hands over public resources to private companies, but also constitutes a new source of corruption. It stated that the Ministry of Health has accumulated debts of more than $500 million.
The money being spent is precisely what is missing to make healthcare services equitable and equal across all of Paraguay. Because it is not enough to build small, extraordinary hospitals at the expense of the entire service network, which lacks supplies, lacks medicines, lacks specialists, it lacks. Both
the Paraguayan Nursing Association and unions of the Social Security Institute, the country's main social security entity, systematically reject the deterioration of the healthcare system, as well as the fact that the government is turning a basic right into a commodity.
Osvaldo Sayas, teleSUR, Asunción, Paraguay.
The Uruguayan government has authorized companies to conduct seismic analysis in Uruguayan waters in search of oil. Environmental organizations are questioning the decision. With details, our colleague Mateo Grille.
The Uruguayan Ministry of Environment has granted an environmental authorization and given the go-ahead for 4 international companies to carry out seismic prospecting projects in Uruguay's exclusive economic zone. The companies are Searcher Geodata, CGE Service, AP Exploration, and PGS. The prospecting intended to obtain geological data that will allow for the evaluation of future drilling in search oil and may be conducted until April, at a distance of between 150 and 300 kilometers from the coast and the depths of 50 and 5,000 meters.
Nature is not simply a resource, but a community of living beings, including humans. Seismic surveys in Uruguayan waters linked to hydrocarbon exploration significantly affect this vital network. It has been proven that the acoustic waves generated by seismic studies alter behavior, feeding, and well-being patterns.
The government decision was rejected by dozens of social organizations that protest several times at public hearings prior to authorization.
Everything that is happening is in violation of national and international environmental protection regulations, and also the procedure in which it is happening, because the real impacts that will be had are being hidden. This fragmentation of projects is like fragmenting the habitat to make it seem like we are studying it or analyzing it. These fragmented projects are fragmenting the impacts and not allowing us to see the totality of what is being discussed, which is of unprecedented seriousness. To think of Uruguay as an extractive country.
A few days ago, hundreds of people gathered in front of a presidential building to protest government decision and demand an oil-free sea. In addition, more than 20,000 signatures rejecting the authorization were delivered, and the protesters asked to be received by authorities. There is no unanimity within the government either. Government legislators are calling for the authorization to be revoked because the environmental risks of seismic prospecting are very high.
The problem with offshore oil extraction is the ecological risks, and these risks are of low probability, but when an accident occurs, the catastrophe is one of magnitude. Let's look at what happened in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010, not so long ago. In the 21st century, with state-of-the-art technology, 80,000 barrels of oil spilled into the Gulf of Mexico. To this day, there are environmental consequences, the decline of whales, dolphins, and everything that has been studied, even crabs. But not only that, there is also an impact on the coast.
The Ministry of Environment has stated that exceptional precautions have been taken to minimize risk and technical experts have approved the authorization. In any case, social organizations continue to react the decision.
Mateo Grille, teleSUR, Montevideo, Uruguay.
The Venezuelan Armed Forces presented a report for the Strategic Operational Command for the year 2025. The report highlights with evidence and supporting documentation the performance of the civic military police fusion guaranteeing security and peace. The report, which accounts for the force's commitment inspired by the Bolivarian ideal, details the destruction of clandestine airstrip and the fight against organizations linked to drug trafficking and other criminal enterprises. The report also accounts for the deployment of troops carried out to guarantee, in addition to peace and security, democratic exercises such as the electoral processes that took place in the country. It provides a clear and detailed overview that contrasts with the widespread rumors promoted by the United States media, which form part of the psychological warfare against the Bolivarian nation. In regards to the fight on drugs, the authorities provided updated information on the results achieved so far. The Brazilian National Armed Forces seized more than 52,800 kilos of drugs in the western region during the year 2025. The drug cargoes were intended to be smuggled illegally into the Venezuelan territory through the state of Zulia, Falcón, and Lara. The report also indicated that they destroyed approximately 45 camps, 40 logistical structures, 35 laboratories, 17 shipyards, 3 semi-submersibles, 122 outboard motors, 223 firearms, and arrested 1,630 people. And on Tuesday, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro inaugurated the Nora Castadeña International School of Women's Leadership in Aragua State, a space dedicated to training, empowerment, and female leadership. In this regard, the head of state informed that the international school has 3 training modules designed to strengthen the leading role of women in the Bolivarian Revolution. The program focuses on training for the transformation of society, for the defense of the homeland, and for building the new economy. Also, President Maduro indicated that in the new year, the new society must continue to be built and put women at the forefront to carry out the admirable challenge 2026. The Venezuelan Foreign Ministry shared on Wednesday an end-of-year message highlighting the unity of citizens and vowing to continue working for the well-being and sovereignty of the nation. Through a post shared on social media by Foreign Minister Ivan Hill, the diplomatic body extended its gratitude and hope to all the people who have managed to maintain unity and dignity in the face of adversity and threats of all kinds. In this context, the Foreign Ministry assured that 2025 leaves Venezuela with lessons and strength that reinforce the country's ability to resist external pressure and to build through solidarity and peace a more just future for all. In its final remarks, the diplomatic body shares it looks toward 2026 with realistic optimism, convinced that the great possibilities that are opening up in dialogue, unity, solidarity, greater popular power, and economic development can and must translate into greater benefits for Venezuelan families. On Tuesday, representatives from the tourism sector reported that Venezuela expects an increase in inbound tourism during 2026, driven by the expansion of air connectivity and the arrival of international visitors. The president of the Venezuelan Association of Travel and Tourism Agencies, Vicky Herrera, indicated that next year presents an opportunity to strengthen tourism activity highlighting the efforts of national airlines to increase their flight offerings to international destinations. According to the association, the activation of new air routes has made it possible to connect foreign cities with key tourist destinations such as Margarita Island and the Los Roques archipelago. In addition, new alliances aimed at diversifying the country's tourism offerings are expected to be formed during the first half of 2026. In Honduras, the National Electoral Council forcibly certified the results of the general elections after refusing to count all the tally sheets and amid several reports of irregularities. The declaration confirms the new composition of Congress and municipal governments. However, councillors within the institution itself denounced that the process was plagued by irregularities. These allegations add to a history of tensions throughout the electoral cycle, including reports of forgery and alteration of official documents. Following the declaration, Attorney General Joel Zelaya announced that once the results are official, the public ministry will initiate legal actions to uncover the truth of what occurred and ensure that no actions against the popular will go unpunished. In this context, the Liberty and Refoundation Party issued a statement categorically rejecting the declaration issued by two members of the National Electoral Council on the election results for president, mayors, and deputies. The political party declared that Jorge Aldana won the mayor election, referring to the municipality of the Central District, which includes Tegucigalpa and Comayagüela. According to the statement, the National Electoral Council is attempting to award the Central District mayoral seat to the National Party, despite the fact that there are still 435 ballots that have not been counted, representing the votes of 98,947 voters. In this scenario, Libre announced that it will not endorse any spurious declaration at the three electoral levels in what it described as the most fraudulent elections in the history of Honduras. On Tuesday, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights granted precautionary measures to 26 disappeared persons in Ecuador. The 26 reported individuals were detained by members of the armed forces in various operations in 2024, and to this day, their whereabouts remain unknown. In this scenario, the Inter-American Court also demanded that President Daniel Noboa's government clarify the forced disappearances and the harassment of military forces against women who search for their disappeared relatives. The regional court decided to extend precautionary measures to 6 women, mostly mothers, daughters, or sisters of the disappeared. Under the so-called armed conflict decreed by President Noboa, state agencies, in addition to denying information about these cases, have been reported for intimidating and threatening those who seek information about their relatives. In Russia, the head of the air defense troops of the aerospace forces, Major General Alexander Romanenkov, revealed that the recent drone attack on an official residence of President Vladimir Putin was launched from the Ukrainian provinces of Sumy and Chernigov. In total, 91 drones were used in an attack that was directed from several directions towards the presidential residence in the province of Novgorod. Despite the Ukrainian deployment, Russian air defense systems managed to neutralize the threat without causing casualties or damage in the area. The offensive was described by the Russian military high command as a deliberate and carefully planned act by the Kiev regime. In this regard, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs described the incident as an obstacle to peace efforts amid negotiations between Russia and the United States. In Paraguay, healthcare workers and opposition legislators denounced that the government of Santiago Peña and the conservative Colorado Party are privatizing public health services. Let's see more in the following report from our colleague Osvaldo Sayas.
Legisladores y organizaciones de trabajadores.
Legislators and workers' organizations have been denouncing a silent privatization of the public health system. For example, the Ministry of Health has awarded services worth $28 million to a private consortium called Canofta.
President Santiago Peña even